Hi, Glendora. Uh, you have asked me for over a year to record for educational purposes how an American dream can turn into a nightmare due to our criminal judicial system with the attorneys, judges, and banks. This surely needs big revision of the law in the United States. My story is really a second Bleak House story. The first Bleak House story was written in the 1850s by Charles Dickens, and the result was to change British law. Our law needs a huge cleaning up of the cesspool, which includes a large percentage of judges, lawyers, and of course the banks. They are one big happy family who are and have destroyed many lives and families. They use what we call a burn bag that assures destroying records and documents. It's been 30 years since my husband passed away, and it's been enough time for me to experience and to endure great torture with many of their schemes and tactics. At one time, 60 Minutes had a program on how the lawyers actually run our country, which includes judges who are merely glorified lawyers in black robes. Now, I came from a family that was very brave, industrious, and hardworking, which I believe must be in my DNA. My mother's parents came to this country when she was 3 months old. Quite brave, I'd say. Also, a relative in the Netherlands saved many people on a sinking ship, of which a statue was erected of him in his name nearabout. On my father's side, his ancestors founded the town of Zeeland, Michigan, of which my family name, Velderman, appears with a group of people on a monument. My grandfather had a large brick company in Michigan, and his friend, Henry Ford, would stop in for coffee when he tried his cars out on the country roads. However, my father reminded me many times of how hard the Depression was in the 1930s. I was born on a farm in Beaver Dam, Michigan. My parents moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan when I was 5 years old. At 7 years old, my mother exposed me to classical music by attending the Grand Rapids Symphony concerts. I was impressed as a child by the famous woman pianist Myra Hess. Being in awe of the beautiful music, I also wanted to speak through my music as she did. I'm sure I was also impressed by the applause and glamour. Then my parents got an upright piano for me. My mother then inquired and found a highly recommended piano teacher whose first husband was the founder of the Chicago Symphony by name of Malachi. At the time of her death, she left me many valuable original Chicago Symphony scores of music. I was a sensitive type from a strict Calvinistic Dutch background. Prayer and reading the Bible at evening meals was a must. And I say we as a family because it included my brother, myself, and another fella, a friend in the neighborhood whose mother and father had both died, and he had no relatives and he had nowhere to go, so my mother took him in. Also my mother's brother, because he was only 12 years old when her mother died, his mother, and my mother also took care of her sickly father. So when I say we, I include all of us who were taught about love, giving, trust, and honesty. And I must say my mother was a very caring and strong person. We were not exposed to so-called worldly activities such as dancing, since this involved bodily movement, and Hollywood movies. Even makeup was discouraged. Church twice on Sunday, plus Sunday school, and no work or shopping on Sundays. However, I was allowed to practice piano on Sundays. Perhaps this all reminds most people of the Pennsylvania Dutch. At 12 years old, I had a vision that God spoke to me that I should speak through my music. Later, I did feel the restrictions as to dancing, etc. It gave me some insecurity, I feel, in exposing my talent while performing. I felt it made me more inhibited with my emotions, which I had to overcome. In retrospect, I remember at one point my hands would stiffen or freeze at the keyboard. But because of my fight and determination, I overcame this anxiety in my zeal to perform. Well, Glendora, I guess in many ways I'm really trying to say my success and accomplishments were hard fought and did not come easily. As a child, I did 6 years of intense study after school, probably about 3 hours after school hours, with my mother supervising my practicing and attending all my lessons. At age 13, my teacher entered me into the Western Michigan piano competition, and at 13 it was the junior division. Now, Joseph Maddie, the founder of Interlochen Music Camp in Michigan, was the main judge. Well, I had a touch of success since I won the junior division. Joseph Maddie said, due to your age, I could not give you the prize for the college division. However, with your flighty fingers, I predict you'll be in Carnegie Hall at age 18. Well, of course, all of this was, in a way, I guess, a surprise to me, and my prize was to perform the Beethoven Piano Concerto No. 1 in C major with the Grand Rapids Symphony. I remember I was quite nervous, but it was successful, and I was well received, and much publicity in the Grand Rapids press with photos, etc. I had a couple of drawbacks in my life after that. I was an attractive young girl. However, I was told to refrain from book reports because as I was growing, my eyesight got worse, and I had to wear glasses, which was not a fashion statement in those days. Previously, I had very good grades. However, in my teens, I saw my classmates having a good time going out, and my teacher was putting photos up on the billboard in the classroom about my success with the piano, and my classmates appeared to me to look at me as though I was a genius or someone different, which I wasn't. Consequently, my grades were also affected. I suppose my concentration level went down. And when graduation time came, my mother went to the dean of the school about my grades. His advice was, she's not college material. She's better off attending secretarial school or learn shorthand, etc. This, of course, was bad advice, since he knew about my success at the piano, but he really didn't care. So, off to the office, Glendora. I worked in an office. I went and I went out with my friends and had good times, and consequently it affected my music. My father bought me a car so I could drive to work. Now, I was also restless. I even entered the Grand Rapids Beauty Contest, and I might add I did not win. Then I drove to New York City with my friends, and we stayed at the Biltmore Hotel, as I recall, near Grand Central Station, for a short vacation. I had different jobs of no interest. Went to college 1 year, majored in piano, and the teacher said she's talented but doesn't work hard enough. Now came the time when my parents said, look, if you work in an office and do not continue your music, your piano, you must pay room and board. Now this upset me, and I said, you do not love me. I must add that my brother did work to pay for his tuition for college. Now, I also must add that this was one of the best lessons my parents could have given me, because underneath I thought, I will show you. Now here comes sort of the beginning of my American dream. Glendora, after several jobs, I landed a job as a secretary to a lovely lady, Barbara Brown, who took a great interest in me. And it was at the community chest in Grand Rapids. She saw I did not have my heart in my work and wanted to know what my interest was, because she said she could see that it was not office work. I explained my musical background. Now, she was very interested in art and music and was a graduate of Chicago University. She had plans to go to New York City to live a year or two to write poetry. She also knew artists such as the brilliant artist named Carl Andre, and there was another artist which maybe has some people may know more of, the name of Frank Stella, and many others. She at one point asked to hear me play and invited me to her parents' home to listen to classical music, in those days on her record player. She was very impressed when she heard me play and said, why not work hard, Suzanne, at your music and try to attend Juilliard Music School in New York City, because I'm going there maybe in a couple years, and it'd be great if you could go there. So she said, forget about the fun. Work hard and your life will unfold on its own. Well, it all sounded good, but I knew my parents could not afford to send me to New York City to attend Juilliard. So her suggestion was, Grand Rapids has a lot of money. You can get a foundation or a grant to help you. She got my interest and determination up, and I got in touch with my teacher's second husband to see if he would allow me to practice at his piano studio. He was also a cellist, since it was close to the office where I was working. He agreed. Now my routine was I'd get up at 5 a.m. to practice until 7 a.m. My father would make breakfast for both of us before we went to our respective jobs. My job was from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Then I'd grab a bite to eat and go to my teacher's studio from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Drive home, 30-minute drive, sleep from 11 to 5 a.m. and start all over again the next day. So I was on a treadmill until after about a year and a half, I came down with mononucleosis, and I had to take a break to rest. Now, my teacher's husband said he thought New York City was much too tough for me. He said one must be physically beautiful, and competition is very keen in every way. However, I did manage to be fitted for contact lenses, which was quite a new thing in those days. That's 50 years ago. So Barbara, my employer, my boss, the one who had spoken to me about going to New York, also loved fashion as I did, and would discuss the fashion designers and taught me how to apply eye makeup. And then a break came my way. While going to work in the morning, I carried my music, and a very pleasant gentleman was on the elevator and said, young lady, how is it? I always see you carrying music in the morning to work. I briefly explained why. This all gave me the idea perhaps he would know of any financial help for me, since he had an insurance company on another floor and would know a lot of important people. I told Barbara, my employer, and she agreed and encouraged me. So a little later, I knocked on his door and asked to see him to present my problem. He was very pleasant and said, "Come back in a couple days. I'll think about it." I did, and he suggested that he could invite a group of prominent people at someone's home where they could meet me and hear me play, including the music critic who wrote about me when I was 13. Now remember, I'm already in my early 20s, and many students who attend Juilliard are from 17 to 20 years old. Some are even as young as 14 years old, such as our present-day genius, Yu Zhao Wang. I think I pronounced that right. This girl is unbelievable in every way. And also, there's the pianist Lang Lang, both Chinese, but they attended the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. They are fabulous. So, of course, I was nervous because I knew this would either make me or break me, so to speak. Now, in those days, people were more formal, so I appeared in a lovely black silk suit that I had designed, and my mother made it in a hurry for me. My determination and hard work got me through, and the music critic gave the go-ahead sign by saying, "She's worth your investment." Now, families took a personal interest in me also, and I guess they liked my appearance, my manner, and above all, probably my dedication and determination. This was really interesting since one of the families who I had worked for in their office in the past didn't recognize me, and it's a good thing he didn't, because I was fired as a receptionist because I forgot to wind their grandfather clock, and I suppose I always made some kind of mistakes since I didn't like office work. However, later on, this gentleman and his wife were so kind to invite me to swim in their pool at their home, since they heard me play, and I presume they didn't recognize me. Also present were members of a lot of prominent families. I mean, the Kellogg family and the Gerber family, food family. There were a lot of families that seemed to live in Fremont, Michigan. And there was the Bissell, the family of the Bissell company, and the Blodgett Furniture Company, Kendall Furniture Company. There are a lot of prominent people there. Now that they gave me the go-ahead sign, I had to get ready for my audition at Juilliard. Okay, now I have to say I never lived outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, which was quite challenging to think about. My mother was tearful at the airport as the plane took off for New York since I was alone. I was never alone like that going outside of Grand Rapids. I don't think my father knew what to think. I believe my sponsors got me through reference letters to stay at the International House across the street from the old Juilliard building in New York on Claremont Avenue near Columbia University. I remember hearing in those days that Juilliard had a total of 500 students in attendance, so one had a slim chance of getting accepted. They were very selective. I believe it was my confidence and hard work, of course, and determination that got me through the audition. And believe it or not, I did get accepted. Well, Glendora, guess what? I was on the way to my American dream, not knowing what was ahead of me, and it's a good thing I didn't know. As Barbara said, your life will unfold on its own. However, remember, I also believe God had a plan. So I stayed at the International House, which was some experience for me. I thank God. I think I had a guardian angel, since I survived many and all experiences, and I am still standing. And I'll add, I'm still young and energetic for my age. I did, by the way, work part-time to make a little extra money. Now here's how my life unfolded. I was assigned to a teacher at Juilliard, which I was not happy with. So I went to the dean and asked for another teacher, which he did assign to me. However, I didn't like him either, for different reasons, which I will not go into. Now this made me quite unhappy and also quite worried. Again, God was watching over me and gave me a break. So now an opera singer studying at Juilliard invited me to a dinner party. I was not a party type, however, she convinced me to attend. Now, as I said, in those days, everybody dressed more than today, so really, I dressed like a model. I remember what I wore. However, I was very reserved and quiet, so I created interest as to who I was. The host happened to be the nephew of George Gershwin. The host asked me about my music and wanted to hear me play. I told him I was not happy at Juilliard due to my teachers that were given to me. So he said, "Suzanne, Juilliard is not the end of the world, you know." He suggested I audition for his uncle, who married into the Gershwin family, who was retired and was teaching in New York City. He said he had taught at Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. He was the head of the piano department there with the famous pianist Joseph Hoffman. Of course, I was only concerned whether my sponsors would go along with my idea of studying privately instead of being enrolled at an institution, because that was a big step, of course. So I did audition for Dr. David Saperton and told him my situation. He agreed to take me on and give progress reports to my sponsors, and he did recommend that they continue to help me. He didn't like the idea I had to work part-time, so he agreed to charge me just $5 a lesson when that was, well, it was longer than an hour, really, so when they were really $20 in those days. Today, that would probably be $300 an hour, maybe to even $500. I don't know. I really don't know what it is today, but I know it's much higher. So the requirement was I had to be in his studio at 8:30 a.m., and he would have me work hard at transposing and improvising, and also work on the weight distribution at the keyboard. He then would give me lunch and send me on my way to practice the rest of the day. He said, "You are very fortunate. I've only heard of sponsors like you have in Chopin's day." You know, anyone who would take a personal interest the way these people were taking an interest in me. So then I had to get an apartment with another female dance student, since I couldn't keep practicing at the International House. Now, one of my sponsors, Mrs. Sally Blodgett, took a special interest in me along with Mrs. Mildred Vogt, and got a used Steinway grand piano for my apartment. They kept track of my progress, as did Mr. John Hibbard, the insurance gentleman, who really was responsible for all my progress in going to New York City. Mrs. Sally Blodgett had an apartment in New York City and had me give her piano lessons and go to concerts at Carnegie Hall. I also met Dr. Saperton and would listen. She also met Dr. Saperton and would listen to me perform at his studio. Now, she had a home in Portland, Oregon, and she asked me to give a recital at the Portland Museum. Interesting side issue is she was she was really a lot of fun, and she took me in a private plane to show me all of Grandfather Blodgett's forest. Acres and acres of it, where they used it to make fine furniture in Grand Rapids and other parts of the world. It was most interesting, of course, and as you may realize, most people realize that Grand Rapids, Michigan was known for making fine furniture. Well, when I returned, Dr. Sapton entered me into a recording competition, of which 68,000 pianists competed, and I did win the Paderewski Gold Medal. We met many people through Dr. Sapton. The Gershwins, Duke Ellington, Dr. Sapton taught his nephew, one of George Gershwin's doctors, other interesting people in art and music, some of his former students from Curtis who made a reputation for themselves. I was Sapton's really prized student at the time, and he left me scores of Godofsky transcriptions and some of the valuable scores of music with his markings, transcriptions, and so on. There was the famous pianist, also very good pianist. Godofsky was a very famous pianist. And then there was also, I believe, a brother-in-law of Gershwin who was a fine violinist. So we met a lot of interesting people. Now, the other step in my life, I will continue on my second episode here. This will be the end of number 1. So the second one, it will be continued on a second one. Thank you very much.